Me, this is JB Akers. I'm the House Chairman of Judiciary for anyone who may be listening online or maybe in the room and doesn't know me. We were also supposed to have this morning's meeting, Nick Preservati, who's the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Director of Department of Energy. His mother passed away, and their commitments to that well, they started last week when she passed, but he has some things to attend to today. I think her service may be tomorrow. So let's just take a few moments to send a prayer for Mr. Preservati and his family, please. All right, with that said, I'll let my co-chairman, if he has anything to add this morning before we get to our panel of speakers, Senator Deeds.
Well, good morning. Just enjoy the presentation. Glad to be here. Glad to see everybody.
All right, so this morning we have Sammy Gray, who's the Director of Government Affairs from AEP. We have Abby Reel, who's the Director of Government Affairs for the state of West Virginia for First Energy. And we also have Mr. Terry Eads, who agreed to be here on behalf of the West Virginia Public Service Commission. Again, this is a broad overview of some energy regulations in the state. We know at this point that energy is one of the key issues we have to confront as a legislature, both in terms of generation, grid stability, affordability. Our constituents' energy prices continue to grow along with those of other folks across the nation and our region. We have a lot of questions about the grid that we currently exist in West Virginia, PJM. That comes up a lot. We expect that to be at least part of today's discussion as well in terms of where the state of West Virginia's future ties in with the PJM grid. So I believe our speakers were told what the expectations were this morning as far as the subject matter. I know they'll do the very best they can to meet that. We know them all. They all do a great job. We appreciate them being here today. We are obviously not in Charleston, so it's a trip for most of us who don't live in this part of the state. So we appreciate your accommodation here today in doing your presentation. So with that said, we'll let them get rolling, and afterwards we will have a Q&A for members. If you have anything for our presenters this morning, not sure which one of you wants to go first. You can go in order, or you can go whichever way you want. So we'll let you guys decide who wants to present and how to roll.
Good morning. Sammy Gray, Director of Government Affairs for Appalachian Power. Good to see everyone this morning. The Judiciary staff kind of laid out some of the issues they want us to touch on within House Concurrent Resolution 22. So the first thing that we were asked to discuss this morning was what can be done to remove regulatory roadblocks for new power generation. And earlier this year, there was a bill, House Bill 4012, that looked at changing the timelines for the issuance of certificates, and specifically the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity for large projects. Right now, a certificate timeline for approval of Public Service Commission for a large project is 400 days. So that's from the time we file to the time we get issuance. The Commission's been very good about, on transmission projects, particularly the ones that are must build by PJM, about expediting that. But when it comes to power generation, if you want to expedite that siting process, making a change in that 400-day approval timeline would help. Maybe 180 days, 6 months might be a better, we're open to discussion and willing, but anything shorter than the 400 days would help. Again, 4012 did not pass the legislature, but it did have some provisions to shorten that 400-day timeline for large projects, and that would help. Another issue that would probably help with new generation is consider taking the state B&O tax off new generation projects. The B&O tax are currently on regulated generation. I'm not asking to take that off, but if you would waive that for new projects, we think that would be helpful as well. The legislature's done quite a bit already to remove barriers. Most of the barriers are at the federal level. And we're also asked, what can we do with our federal delegation to help that? So our idea is we'll tell you what we're doing at the federal level, and you can communicate that to our federal delegation to see if they can support those issues. So the first thing we're doing right now is we're working with Ohio Representative Troy Balderson on a legislation that would expedite new base load generation for the siting and other issues at the federal level. And also for citing for new generation, we're working on reforms to NEPA. That's the National Environmental Policy Act for better permitting times, and seeking changes to NEPA that would place limitations on legal actions that are taken by environmental groups to slow down projects. Not only would that help for power generation, but also, for natural gas pipeline projects as well. We're also actively looking to make changes to the Federal Clean Air Act right now on the Hill in Congress. Currently, the way the Clean Air Act works is you have provision 111 D as in dog of the Clean Air Act, and that's for existing projects. When you go to work on an existing facility and you need an air permit, and then you go through 111D. However, for the last several decades, EPA has held if the project is large enough, they didn't kick you out of section 111D and go to 111B as in boy. That's new source permitting. So while we're still doing work at an existing facility, if it's large enough, they kick us over to a new source permit, and that's a much harder permit to get than a permit for an existing project. And we're also working to make some additional changes to 111B as in boy, new source permit projects under the Clean Air Act for better permitting times for new projects as well, especially as we're looking for the construction of new generation projects. So one of the things that we've also been doing to state and federal level is we've been working with federal officials, both in administration and the legislative branch at the federal level, and our state office of energy on securing U.S. Department of Energy grants and loans. So far, we've been awarded loans, $34.6 million from the U.S. Department of Energy's Coal Recommissioning and Modernization Program, and that's for projects at both John Amos and Mountaineer. There are a handful of projects at both of those. John Amos power plant is in Putnam County, and Mountaineer power plants in Mason County. We also secured $51 million from the U.S. DOE's Defense Production Act for the Mitchell Power Station in Marshall County for a new cooling tower for that facility. We're currently still working on projects for the U.S. Department of Energy's Energy Dominance Financing Loan Program, or the EDF program. Applications for that program are due in the fall. And why are these important, seeking these federal grants and loans? That's monies that won't go back onto the ratepayer. They won't pay for the whole projects, but at least that's a portion of those projects that won't go back on the customer's bills. On the loan side, we're a little cautious of how many loans we take, because if we do lots of projects, those will still go back into rate base. However, if we can get a low interest loan from the federal government, that still saves customers money because the financing will be cheaper than it would be going to the private market. So we're still looking at those projects too for our current coal-fired power plants to continue to make upgrades in those while trying to give customers some relief as we do that as well. And we've also been working with our federal delegation and other utilities and the federal administration on changes to 4 EPA rules that were issued. In 2024, the Biden administration's EPA put out 4 rules that were designed essentially to shut down coal-fired power plants. Those were the greenhouse gas rule, the effluent limit guideline rule, sometimes called the zero ELG rule, the legacy coal combustion residuals rule, and the MATS, mercury and air toxins rule. Once administrations changed last year, Trump's EPA put out a redo, a new version of the greenhouse gas rule, a new version of the zero EL and the ELG rule, both of those that were more favorable for coal-fired power plants and to ensure that they get the longevity out of those plants that we need. They didn't make a change to the MATS rule last year, but through executive order, the president did allow for a list of power stations that were supposed to implement the 2024 match changes, and essentially gave them a pass where they don't have to do that, but that was done to executive action. However, for Appalachian Power, the match rule isn't that big of an issue. The last match rule was in 2012 prior to the 2024 rule, and we put equipment in for our power plants that was so robust, it would actually have met the 2024 rule as well. But the industry is still looking to address that mercury and air toxins rule as well. And then earlier this year, the administration put out an updated legacy coal combustion residuals rule. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the legacy CCR rule. And what the 2024 legacy CCR rule essentially required us to do, it piggybacked on the 2015 rule, which made us go back and put additional requirements in for coal combustion residuals, coal ash. Okay, but the 2024 legacy rule took those 2015 rules for current power plants and applied them to anywhere that we've ever had a power plant, even if the plant's not there anymore. And what those rules require are monitoring wells to put around each former coal ash site. Oh, and by the way, we closed all those to every regulation at the time, every state and federal regulation. Unfortunately, the goalposts were moved on us in 2024. But we put the monitoring wells around the coal ash sites, monitored them for 3 years. If there's water that comes into the coal ash, then it has to be closed by removal, which you're talking about removing hundreds of millions of coal ash, tons of coal ash that's been there for decades and decades in some locations. And, the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, where it's not hurting anything, most likely not hurting anything right now. It hasn't hurt anything. But unfortunately, that cost goes back onto our regulated customers if we have to do that. So that rule is open right now for public comment. We've worked with the state, our trade organizations, and other utilities to file comments to that rule. Those comments were originally due June 12th, but US EPA has extended those, and offhand, I'm not sure exactly what that new extension date is. But we are filing comments on the rule and have worked with state regulators and our trade organizations to make sure that we're kind of all in sync and we're all saying the same thing to make sure that we get relief from the legacy coal combustion residuals rule. And our company also is the only company in DC working with America's Power. America's Power is a trade organization that helps advocate for coal-fired power generation in Congress. So we're working on them to make sure that we can further policy on coal generation. The other item we were asked to address today were supply chain constraints. I know your next presenter, Abby Reel from First Energy, is going to go a little more in depth on that, but still wanted to kind of give our side of the issue. And national supply chain constraints for whether it's power plant products, which is turbines, or whether it's more on the transmission side. Transformers, breakers, switch gears, and associated equipment right now is running anywhere from 3 to 6 years behind once you order equipment. And those long times have required significant advance deposits and long-term financial equipment before equipment will ever be delivered. There's such a demand right now for new generation and new hookups to transmission that manufacturers just can't keep up. So at APCO right now, kind of on the wire side, transformers, breakers, switch gears. By the way, it's not just transformers. When you build a new substation, you have to have all that other equipment, especially the breakers that go with it that match those transformers. We're looking at about a 4-year lead time right now. And we're the one of the largest utilities in the United States. And we have very good relationships with the suppliers, but they just can't keep up with demand. They're building new manufacturing facilities, but that takes time too. They can't put those up overnight. There's also lead times for gas turbines right now. You're looking at a 5-year plus lead time if you order gas turbines today to build a new natural gas power plant. However, at APCO, we've pre-ordered and prepaid for a handful of gas turbines. So we can build a natural gas plant much quicker than most anyone else who's trying to look to get turbines today. So how do we relieve that? One of the things we think could help supply chain constraints is integrated supply chain manufacturing, trying to attract those manufacturers to West Virginia. And we're in a competition, for any type of manufacturing with other states. But how do we do that? We feel that tax credits for manufacturers of electrical equipment would help, and also provide financial incentives for manufacturers to locate to the state. I know that's not real popular sometimes, but we have 49 other states that are giving financial incentives. And if we want to compete, unfortunately, we're just going to have to do that, either through tax credits, financial incentives, or a combination of both. So those are kind of the two issues we were kind of asked to address today. On those federal actions, any support that we can get from the state to our federal delegation, we believe that would help tremendously. Mr. Chairman, that's what I have, and be happy to answer any questions.
Let's wait. We'll do Q&A at the end for everybody. Let's let all the presenters give their
Sounds
talk
good.
first, because some of the questions may overlap. So I appreciate that, Mr. Gray. Mr. Reel, did you want to go next?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Abby Reel, Senior Advisor for West Virginia First Energy, Mon Power Potomac Edison, and wanted to talk more on our new generation project. So on the federal side, we have applied for a DOE loan for that new build, as well as for some transmission that would go with that interconnection as well. And then also we have been working with the state, and you'll see a little bit here, but not mainly in the presentation, on PJM. So we've had conversations about what we would like to see. There will be a meeting in July with FERC regarding PJM. We have had some other issues we've been looking at on constraints, and we'll talk more about that as I get into the transmission side. But for right now, on new generation, we have a 1,200 megawatt natural gas plant we will be building on the property located next to Fort Martin. That is property that we have owned. It's actually going to be called the Maysville Energy Center. And so that is a $2.5 billion project we hope to have online by 2031. We also have the DOE loan, but with that, the interconnection for that transmission side as well for that. The solar projects, it's about 70 megawatts. We already have those solar panels. We did it through the Buy American Act. So those actually, I believe, come from Georgia or Alabama. And those will be in Hancock, Preston, Tucker counties, reuse of old brownfield sites that we own as well. So this just kind of shows what you will be expecting from our the benefits of our natural gas plant and even solar here in the state. So as West Virginia is a regulated, vertically integrated state, whenever we buy and sell power into the market, that benefits our ratepayers. So we are looking in the future, and we have to plan 10 years ahead with the PSC and our filings. So as we are making our case for our CPCN filing, which is before the commission right now for this new natural gas and solar build out, we have to make our case, right? So we have about a 200 megawatt shortfall that we are looking at, anywhere in the 2028 range to 2029 range. And then, of course, after that, by 2040, we are looking at 1,000 plus megawatts need for here in the state. So that's what we're building to meet and to try to get ahead of with that 2031 online build. And you likely will potentially see more of that happen. So we are answering the call when it comes to the 50 by 50. But essentially on the cost side, when we're looking at it, we're trying to keep ourselves from buying out of the PJM market, to keep our costs and our rates stable, which I will note our rates are the lowest in surrounding states. And they remain that way in the foreseeable future with what we're seeing. Supply chain bottlenecks. So like Sammy was talking about, we've already put in our order for our turbines. When it comes to everything else, it's limited on manufacturers here in the country. We would love to see a manufacturer. I know Weirton area, if we have anybody from Weirton, we do have a steel mill sitting there that we would love to supply power to. And so delays that we see in that, we hope that it doesn't affect our new build. We don't see that for now, but anything could happen. And then just in the future, so what you're looking at on gas turbines, as Sammy was saying, about 4 years, we're seeing 3 to 5 years. Transformers, anywhere from 18 to 36 months. And breakers and switchgear, it can be anywhere up to 18 months to 2 years or more. And one thing to note when it comes to economic development, it's not just us that have transformers on our side or substations on our side. You also see that on the end user side as well, that they have to get this equipment as well to interconnect. So this is a timeline of what we have coming up, and I'll just, overview for this. We currently have bids out for engineering. That is going to be complete here soon, and by September, we hope to have the gas supply and transportation contracts done. So that's kind of our timeline and what you see here. And then we, of course, have our CPCN filing before the commission, and that will be happening this fall as well. And then interconnection timeline, I wanted to be able to provide this so that it's not just we're building a natural gas plant. We also have to concurrently be working with PJM. And so we are already in the application review process for PJM to interconnect that gas plant. So this is just the process that you'll see. And so by 2028 is when that process, so this adds to that timeline. So just wanting to talk when it comes to timeline, it's not just equipment, it's also interconnection and working with PJM through that process and making sure that we are working concurrently with PJM and everything else that goes into play. So as we work through what we need to on the natural gas side and the plant side, that we're also working on this process as well. So into transmission, we have Valley North project for us, Valley, and so Valley Link is the overall project. So we are working with AEP TransSource and with Dominion. We do have a video, so I'll play that really quickly if I can. I don't know if it's gonna work. Gonna work. Okay. Well, you get the overview by me. So with Valley Link, this is a brand new 765 kV line. But last year, PJM, and I didn't get time to put it into this presentation, but PJM did a presentation last year. And when you looked at the map of the state of West Virginia, there is no backbone type of line like 765, 500 kV or anything going through the middle of the state. This will now be going through the middle of the state. So with this, we are doing open houses coming up. There will be 2 new substations, one in Hardy County, one in Frederick County. We also have the whole mantra, if you build it, they will come. So this is a 765 kV line we otherwise would not have here in the state. We also see it as something as for our new generation, for Harrison Power Station, John Amos Power Station that will interconnect into it. So we need to have that bigger trunk to be able to push power out. I will say that we have had congestion issues on our power lines recently for our coal plants that we currently have. So that's not a surprise. It's something that happened during Winter Storm Fern that we were working with PJM on, but essentially we're pushing power from west to east. And if we do not have the transmission to be able to do that, so when you think of a natural gas pipeline, you have a bigger gas pipeline to push it through, and then to the houses, you have those distribution lines, right? So think of the same way with transmission. You have to have that larger transmission line to be able to push the power out. So that is something that we have had issues with when it comes to congestion going west to east. That is why Valley Link, Dobbs, even Marl are important for us as we look to do 50 by 50 and bring on new generation. You have to have transmission. So we will have, starting June 30th, I believe it's actually in Jefferson County is the first open house. We will have about 23 open houses. 20 of those are actually, I believe, in the state of West Virginia. And I will actually click here so you can see what those are. And I want to say that, for your constituents and your communities, we do have information on the website for Valley Link. Do invite them to come to these. We want to hear from them, but not only can they attend these, but if they can attend these, they can also put comments on in our website as well. So do encourage that attendance and that input. And here is the timeline for Valley North project. So we do have our stakeholder engagement that is happening. We also have our open houses that are coming. And then we also have the feedback that we hope to get from that. And this is a whole new route study. So what I mean by that is we have been meeting with local counties to see, here's the different routes we are looking at. We've met with DNR, DEP, DOT, you name it, to try to figure out what is going to be the best route here in West Virginia. And so that has occurred, continues to occur. And then, of course, by 2027, we hope to have the route identified. So then we can receive other permitting and feedback on that as well. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reel. Mr. Eads, on behalf of the Public Service Commission, you have probably a little more specific information regarding PJM and some other issues, but just broadly, whatever you want to discuss. I think you got the same sheet as the other two folks, so we'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. My name is Terry Eads, and I've got about 35 years of public utility regulatory experience. Today, I'm basically an independent consultant that works is providing help to the Public Service Commission. I was asked to come up to the meeting today, and I understand the specific topic they'd like me to address is the recent White House and Governor's Statement of Principles to PJM. I think it's obviously to everyone that the issue of data centers is a significant event, probably in the history of the country. The size of the loads are monumental, and they're far beyond what the normal utility regulatory process has been used to dealing with. It's one thing to pick up a 100 megawatt industrial customer or a subdivision, but to get loads in the order of 1,200 megawatts, and that puts that's a whole new set of criteria that you have to deal with. So the governor's put together along with the White House, principles that they asked PJM to consider in its future deliberations. And this was put forth back in January. And based on what I've seen, PJM is presently working on. The Board of Governors of PJM has asked its staff to address these things. But the goal here will be to get these changes to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which has governance basically over PJM. And then if those changes are made, then the states will then follow along in line and take what actions we need at the state level to facilitate that. Pretty much the goal of it, as it says in the final closing, is that the principles are intended to authorize the state utility commissions to allocate costs primarily to the data centers and to protect residential ratepayers. Comment I'd make about that is it is clearly important that we protect residential ratepayers, but from the state of West Virginia standpoint, I personally believe we need to also be aware of the effects upon our commercial and our industrial base. Particularly in our industrial base, we have coal mining, gas processing, chemicals, steel, ferroalloys, and chlorine. We had a lot of large industrial customers. And if we're not diligent in how we allocate the costs that are needed to serve these new loads, we could do harm to those other customers equally as well as we could harm residential customers. Sometimes I say if you harm an industrial customer, you harm a residential customer because they may not have a job anymore. So it's important that we look out for all of what I'll say are the incumbent customers as we move forward. In terms of the 6 principles that were laid out, there's a couple of them that are kind of interesting. Normally, PJM is focused upon providing a market. The generation will, if generation is needed, the market will provide it. One of the principles that is being put forward is basically to guarantee new capacity that is built to serve data centers with a guaranteed 15-year price. This is to basically remove the risk or to mitigate some of the risk to encourage more people to come into the market. Not just incumbent utilities like Appalachian or Mon Power, but also independent power producers. So we'll see how that goes, but that has been put out and PJM is looking at that. That will, of course, take FERC's authorization. Obviously, the other one of it is to protect the residential customers, and they propose to do that by means of a price collar, that in future price auctions, there's a limit to how high you could bid in and how low you could go. Sometimes that's contrary to a market, but it is one of the thoughts they've asked PJM to look at. And of course, I think the bigger one here is to recognize that we need to allocate the cost of new facilities that are being built for the data centers to the data centers to the extent we can. And in that way, protect the normal customers from the risk of this developing market. The issue of the commission is obviously concerned about the cost increases that we have incurred, and they're concerned about the cost increases that may be coming or could come with the data centers. And so basically, I believe from the conversations that I've had with the commission, understand I'm not one of the commissioners, and these issues have not been fully vetted before them in a proceeding. But from the discussions that we've had, the commission believes that these general principles that have been given to PJM and the PJM are working on provide a reasonable framework for addressing the potential costs that are coming in the future. And with that, that's my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Eads. So unless my co-chair here has anything to add at the beginning, we have, I think, plenty of time for Q&A from the members. That can be for any of the panelists whatsoever. So we have a microphone. I'll go ahead and pass it around here.
Thanks. Bill Ridenauer, District 100, Jefferson County. So I have a series of questions. First and foremost, can somebody explain who is paying for Valley Link and Marl? Are these going to be these costs going to be imposed on West Virginia ratepayers?
So it is a PJM regional transmission project. So it's all 13 states of PJM, and it gets allocated out from that. So it's going to be all ratepayers of PJM.
Okay, so we in West Virginia are going to be paying
Yes.
to supply power to Virginia. And can you tell me specifically what is the draw for this energy? What is causing us to develop these transmission lines? Are these for facilities inside of West Virginia or for the facilities in Virginia?
So so if you're a large user of power, 250 megawatts or more, we end up doing a detailed load study for you to figure out how to provide power to you here in the state of West Virginia. So if you're coming to the state of West Virginia and we need to supply power to you, we have that detailed load study process. These projects, because they're a regional transmission project, that means there's some type of violation or congestion within a certain area. We have to have those lines in order to provide power even here in the state of West Virginia. So it's not just power to other states within PJM, which does benefit our ratepayers because we're selling into that market to those ratepayers in Virginia or wherever. That is beneficial for us. However, for these lines, they have to be there in order for the whole grid as a whole to be able to work and get power out on the line, but then also be able to drop a substation off a larger line.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't quite that clear. Where is the primary energy demand coming from? Is it coming from West Virginia, or is it coming from Virginia? Since these lines go to Virginia, is the power demand coming from Virginia?
It's all PJM.
It's all PJM. Okay, so the power lines are going to Virginia, correct?
West to east.
Right, to Virginia, correct?
Virginia, Maryland, East Coast.
Okay, and there's a substation in Maryland. That's great. I'm concerned about West Virginia, not Maryland.
As well.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm trying to get to is, and this is apparent to most of us who've actually been looking at this, is that the demand is coming from data centers in Virginia. And Virginia made a decision to get rid of their coal natural gas plants. And now they're imposing their demands for power for their data centers upon West Virginia. And we, as part of PJM, are being required to pay for that. And that does not make sense to me. I don't understand why West Virginia should be paying for a Virginia decision relative to their data centers. They've decided that they want to go with coal or with solar and wind, and they're going to stick us with paying for the transmission lines. Can you explain to me why West Virginia should be paying for transmission lines for data centers in Virginia?
Every year, PJM has a regional like our TEP process. And how that works is whatever we have contracted load here in the state of West Virginia. So I will say that we have over 1,000 megawatts that are going to be contracted this year. That's massive. That's exciting. That will go into the next regional transmission process for PJM to then look at what's going on in the state of West Virginia, what needs to be built. That happens every year throughout the whole PJM 13 states. So every year they are putting out bids for these regional transmission projects, whether it's in West Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, you name it. Every year, West Virginians will be paying for something as part of PJM for those regional transmission projects.
So why
Even
should
if they're not
West Virginia remain part of PJM if we are going to increase rates for our customers, for the customers in West Virginia to pay for other states? I don't understand that. Can you explain that?
That's a question for the state of West Virginia. It's not something that we weigh in on.
Okay. So, and you've answered some of the question relative to the data centers. You're basically you're imposing costs upon West Virginia ratepayers, and you're going to be putting transmission lines through West Virginia. How are you going to put those in if people don't want them in their areas? I know in my district, everyone I have talked to is against new transmission lines coming through. And apparently both of these transmission lines, Marl and Valley Link, are going to be coming through my district. And I know exactly where they're going to go through because I know the people that live in those areas, and they're as poor as can be. So why should they lose their land? Why should they lose the vistas that we love in Jefferson County? I mean, it's an extremely beautiful area. Why should we lose those so that Virginia can get these power lines?
The state PSC is the one who decides siting. So we still have not decided what route that will be for Valley Link. We're still going through that process. So that will go before the PSC on siting.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Hillenbrand in the back there. Can someone grab the mic, please, for him? Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate it. I've got a few different topic type questions, but I'll begin where Delegate Ridenour began. And for those that don't know, I'm Delegate Rick Hillenbrand, represent parts of Hampshire and Mineral County. Ms. Reel, you had mentioned a 200 megawatt shortfall in the 2028 timeframe. Is that a shortfall for West Virginia's needs or PJM's requirements?
Any shortfall I mentioned was West Virginia needs.
Okay. Appreciate knowing that specifically. I realize nobody there specifically is with the PSC, in some aspects of these questions, specifically Delegate Ridenour's line of questioning will ultimately be PSC type decisions, but has PJM re-examined the original need statement for some of these transmission lines? When you talk to the people over in Virginia and those areas, there's significant pushback from Virginia for additional build outs in that regard. So I'm wondering, are we building a train system and a train station where there's no customers?
Well, keep in mind that the grid is interconnected. I mean, it's not just one line that goes from point A to point B. You know, from the Welton Springs substation, there'll be lines go out in West Virginia when it goes on into Frederick, Maryland. your lines go out for West Virginia, it's a reliability project, not just for one location. It's for all PJM. That's why it's called a grid. It's interconnected at many, many points. It's not just a line that starts in one location and stops in the other. It affects the reliability all the way along the line, particularly from each substation it stops, which there'll be two.
So I get that, and we've talked about this personally, and many of us in this room many times. And if you look at the PJM network, there are providers and there are many consumers, but there seems to be a logistics issue here that seems to not be being taken into account. And again, Delegate Ridenour mentioned that Virginia likes to piously state they're all about clean energy, but doesn't mind importing, fossil generated energy and all the rest of that. So it makes a whole lot more sense, even on a distributed network, to have that production closer to the consumption rather than transmitting it across the country.
Yeah, it gives us the opportunity to sell that excess power. I mean, it helps West Virginia. That's more coal you're going to burn in West Virginia, the opportunity to sell more of West Virginia's power. We've been a net exporter of power for decades upon decades. That's not new. We've been able to, West Virginians benefit from the taxes the plants pay. They benefit from the coal that's mined and burned here. And that's the benefit they get from it, is the generation itself, be able to sell it. We've always been a net exporter, and that's nothing new. And you only get that to market one way, and that's through transmission lines.
Sure. Well, I'll wrap up with this statement. I hope in the end that people take into account all the inputs and all the rest of that. Certainly, the PSC has seen about 40 letters of protest for every single letter of support for the Morrow line right now. I've talked to the folks at AEP and next year and other places about approaches that could ameliorate some of these issues, such as occasionally burying some of these lines and things like that. But it seems to be a business decision right now not to do that. So I think many of our constituents, again, District 100 and other places, they too have an input in this, and there's strong opposition. Let me ask another question. This is an easy one, Mr. Gray, if I could, specific for you. I'm concerned a little bit about the long lead time. Both you and Ms. Reel had mentioned long lead time for components. Should we be concerned with regards to maintenance and emergent repairs with regards to that? I mean, when you say, 36 months for a transformer, and then you have a lightning strike or something like that, and a transformer blows up, is this something that, we should be concerned about? And maybe it's a second order issue, but we're not thinking about it.
Well, we keep a supply generally for backups of our own. We just don't like to take those from new builds, then we don't have a backup. We typically try to keep backup equipment for ourselves in the same size of equipment. Yeah, if enough of it goes down, maybe it's a problem in the future, but we do try to keep a supply of backup for our own use, just in case that happens.
Okay, so not something to be worried about tonight or something immediately down the road. Like we're supposed to get storms today,
Yeah, we keep a backup equipment for ourselves, but then if we use that for new build, then we don't have the backup equipment to serve our current customers.
I appreciate understanding that balancing act. The final question, and Mr. Gray, more for you. With the coal ash conversation, coincidentally, some conversations the last 24 hours here, coal ash has a component of rare earth elements in it. Is there any movement in regards to trying to extract any of that?
There are some companies out there looking to do that. We've given some of them samples of our coal ash to see if they can do that. So far, there's nothing been at commercial scale, but I know there's a lot of research going on still in companies, doing small amounts of it. But we're hoping that they can use that for something going forward, rather than a lot of right now is land applied. It'd be nice to have some product that we can be used out of it. There's also not just rare earth minerals. I mean, there's other companies look at making construction products from it and other things too, beyond just rare earth mineral extraction going on right now.
Is there anything, more definitive that you can share with us at this point in time in that regard? Is AEP perhaps working on research and development in these regards, or anything that, things that we should perhaps be looking toward as well with regards to trying to help?
We haven't. I mean, we've been, allowing others to do that research. We haven't done it ourselves, and we have plenty enough to do. We just, keep the plants going and running. that's not been something that we've looked at. We'd like for somebody to be able to take that product and use it so we don't have to land apply it. I mean, we'd rather have some beneficial reuse of it. I mean, there is some now. I mean, some of it goes into concrete, some of it goes into other construction materials, but we'd like to see the rest of it be used too, rather than just be put in a landfill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Delegate Butler up in the front here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To anyone who may want to answer this, I guess it's been about 6 years ago, we passed legislation, if I remember correctly, that reduced the tax rate for power generation for facilities that were below 60% or 50% or something like that. That's back when we were first passing a bill to allow for the solar power build out. So what capacity rate are the power plants operating at now? Are we still around 50, 60%, or what is the capacity now?
For coal-fired power plants,
Yes.
well, that capacity factor is starting to go up as the price of natural gas goes up and demand goes up. We're in probably overall for us in the 40s, to 50 range.
You're
Usually in the
40,
40
50% capacity generation now?
Yes, typically. I mean, that changes by the day because we bid into the market each day, and what we run the next day is based on how market conditions. And what we do for customers is, we bid in today for what runs tomorrow, whatever that clearing price is. If our coal plants make the clearing price and they run. If they're more expensive of what we bid in than what the clearing price is, we buy it out of the market because it's cheaper for customers. But we're doing less and less of that all the time as the market demands are pushing that price up, and the coal plants are running more often because we're able to successfully bid in that market more often.
Okay, so back then it was explained to me, and I think us as a legislature, that the power plants work most efficiently when they're running at a near peak capacity. Is that correct?
I mean, there are efficiencies, but also they break down more when you run them wide open too. So there's a balance. But the problem is it's about the cost. I mean, or do you want ratepayers to pay more just to run them more? I mean, it's really about trying to do what's best for our ratepayers and their rates.
Okay, well, back then it seemed like the discussion was it was more difficult. It was cause more wear and tear on the power plants to cycle them up and down was what the problem was. Now it seems like, well, it seemed like a little bit different explanation what you just gave me there. So I guess my ultimate question then is if they're running at 40, 50% now, why do we need to build new power plants?
Well, there's a difference between energy and capacity. Okay, what you're talking about is energy. The opposite, there's two different markets that we participate in. One's energy, that's the day ahead that we bid in today for what runs tomorrow. That's the energy PJM needs for that day. Okay, the other market is the capacity market. That's separate. Well, we actually don't participate in the capacity market because our company is FRR, fixed resource company, but we have to have enough capacity to handle every customer's maximum load on the hottest or coldest day of the year. Whatever day of the year it is, if everybody's running wide open, we have to have enough capacity to meet that. And as we're getting new load, we're going to need more capacity. That's separate from the energy because not everybody runs wide open all the time on their energy use. So we have to have enough capacity for peak times when we have the highest load, rather than, that we're talking about capacity factors. That varies because, the usage varies from day to day with our customer base. So there's two different issues.
Okay, well, that's a good explanation. That helps me understand that a lot more. Now, Abby, you had mentioned something about exporting or importing power into West Virginia. Do we?
We don't import. So we export. So we're looking at close to 200 megawatts short by 2028, 2029. So depending on what that looks like with the energy capacity, with the demand at that point, we could end up buying directly out of the market for anything short that we would be. But the goal is to have our new generation online. So for us, we're adding and adding residential, commercial, industrial, you name it, data centers into our load mix every day. And so we've got to build new generation to serve those end users. And so that was that part. We don't want to have to buy out of the market, hence why we are building.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand it entirely, but this whole capacity and generation thing is difficult. Now, the capacity requirement, is that a federal requirement or is that a state requirement?
For running plants or
Well,
just buying?
I think what Sammy explained was that the companies are required to have enough money for,
Yeah.
I guess, again, the terminology escapes me sometimes, but the demand that may be coming, the peak capacity. So you're required to have that availability. So is that a requirement from the federal level? Is that a requirement from the state level?
Both. If we're a regulated utility, we are required to serve. We can't turn
Okay.
people away. So if they want electric service, we have a mandate to serve. So if someone wants to be a customer, we have to serve them. So we have to have that capacity to serve them. And we're adding capacities. We're just trying to get ahead of the curve of what we're seeing. We can't wait till they come and want to be served and then not have the capacity to serve them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think that's all I have for now. Appreciate it.
Delegate Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple different questions. One is related to the questions raised earlier about the transmission lines. And I wanted to go back to the last night of the session, like about an hour before session closed. The House passed a bill that essentially codified the governor's 50 by 50 goal, 50 gigawatts by 2050. And I guess this is more of a statement than a question, but just pointing out that if West Virginia is basing its economic development strategy on building more power plants and being the battery to this part of the country, there's going to have to be more transmission lines to get that power out to serve loads in other states. You can't really have it both ways. If you're going to build a lot of new power plants, they're going to have to serve other states, and that includes red states and blue states. States where you agree with their energy policy and states where you may not agree with them, but you can't have it both ways. I had a question for Terry, though. You talked about the principles to protect ratepayers. And my question for you is that clearly there's some things that PJM could do to protect ratepayers, but what could we do as a legislature to protect ratepayers from taking on the costs of these new data centers?
Well, I think that'll work. Okay. I think the earlier conversation kind of dovetails into this, and that is when you talk about the costs that are going to be incurred by West Virginians related to these transmission lines. One of the issues with the cost of these transmission lines and what they will impose upon West Virginia is a function of the rate design that PJM has for transmission, how they allocate the cost among all of the member states or among the member utilities or whatever. And I believe that the commission itself needs to, along with others, what I'm hearing is there's a lot of discussion about changing that rate design. In the broad sense, what PJM does, it takes the full cost of that line and they allocate in rough terms 50% of that cost to the cost causer, and the other 50% gets allocated across all of the PJM states. And so what you have here is in the case of, let's say, I hate to pick on the Morrow line, but the Morrow line is right now a good portion of that, 50% of it will be spread among all the states, and we will get our share of it. But there's a lot of talk that these data centers are changing the game, and that the cost, and that they are the true cost causer. And perhaps we should change that allocation process at the FERC, such that the cost causer pays much more than, say, 50% of it, and relieve the incumbent utility, relieve the traditional ratepayer of that potential burden. So I think that is one of the topics that's being addressed at FERC. It took probably, I'm going to say, the current cost allocation process occurred about 12 years ago. And when they came up with it, and it took a good while to come up with that process. But I think that what we're hearing now is that there is going to be a push, or there is an interest, particularly among not just West Virginia, but among the PJM states, to re-examine that cost allocation process for the very reasons that we're talking about here. That it may, in many cases, be placing a burden on individuals and customers that really shouldn't necessarily be carrying the cost. Now, it doesn't address where the line goes. The lines will have to go where they go to get from the generating source to the load. And that is going to run it in some cases through West Virginia, as with the Valley Link line that's being talked about here. But who pays for it is another question, and I think PJM is looking at that. And I'm sure the state commission will be involved with that.
So in the last week, First Energy actually petitioned to FERC on data centers and network costs. So that is something we are advocating for on our own when it comes to ratepayers. So we are very into making sure our ratepayers are not having to pay for that cost, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial. So I do think you're going to see more happen at the FERC level. We are also letting the PSC know and the state know what we are up to when it comes to our conversations with FERC and PJM. So you do see us as the utility advocating on that front as well. In West Virginia, where we are vertically integrated, we're able to contract directly with those data centers, not only for transmission, but obviously our generation. Those conversations are also happening. So it is something that is occurring and seeing, and that you will see. So that's hopefully somewhat helpful.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some movement toward protecting ratepayers from the additional transmission costs, which is good. But
I would see that as network upgrades is how you would see that.
Are there localized costs specifically where the data centers are connecting into the grid, and are ratepayers protected from those increased costs?
They pay their costs. That's contracted with them directly with the PSC. So that is something that is already happening now, happens today, is that they pay for their interconnection, their transmission costs on that end. Yes. It's the network piece that you're talking about, I think, when it comes to getting from X to Z to get them to that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really asking about any additional costs, whether it's the network costs or any other types of costs. Okay.
Did I answer that?
Yeah, I think so. And then I had one last question for Sammy, because you brought up the coal ash regs. And which sites across West Virginia are the legacy sites that your utility has to address under the 2024 rule?
Oh, we have legacy sites at our current plants, which is John Amos and Mitchell and Mountaineer. But we also have our Cabin Creek site in Shillian, where there used to be a power plant that we tore down in 1980. We also have the Kanawha River plant in eastern Kanawha County. That's a legacy site. And then we also have the Cameron site in Marshall County.
And when those, do those have coal ash landfills on site?
They do. The coal ash landfills that we, followed every rule and every regulation at the time to close, and were, approved by state and federal regulators at the time.
Sure. Are they lined?
They are not.
Okay. And do you know if they're in contact with groundwater, if the ash is in contact with groundwater?
Well, the legacy sites without a current plant have a little faster timeline. We have installed the monitoring wells for those, and we have a 3-year window to see if it is. And if so, under the current regulation, we'd have to close by removal.
Do you know, based on the monitoring data, if there's pollution that's moving offsite into groundwater of neighboring properties?
Not that we've seen so far, but we'll continue to monitor and see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think Senator Fuller had his hand up first, and we'll get to you, Senator Garcia.
Thank you. I just got a question. It's probably a simple-minded question because this is kind of difficult for me to keep up with, but I remember last session during an Senate Energy Committee meeting, we had talked about the rates of the customers going up. And one of the reasons that was provided was that the loss of population in the southern part of West Virginia was causing more of the burden to be put on the remaining customers. Now, I guess my question is, if we have more energy being consumed by, say, the data centers, why does that not count towards the customers that will be utilizing this energy, because they use a lot more energy than what, let's say, 50,000 other customers would use? So why doesn't that decrease our rates for the customers that are still drawing the energy? So I guess if you can answer that question, because I think I asked that question last time and it was said, well, if we do have that, they would drop. So now it looks like they're saying, well, now they're going to increase because we have more power usage because the data centers are going to require so much energy. So if you could answer that, I'd appreciate it.
I may regret I took the mic from Sammy. That's this is something that I frankly have personally been looking at over the last month or so. We have a different situation in the northern half of the state than we do in the southern half of the state. The northern half of the state is growing, and that favors Mon Power and Potomac Edison. Unfortunately, for those of AEP in the southern part of the state, we've seen a decline, and that's probably while costs have gone up in general. Fuel costs have gone up, the cost of material has gone up, everything has gone up. But one of the big hits to the state of West Virginia, and particularly to APCO in the southern part of the state, is the loss of customers. It started about 2004 when APCO lost Century Aluminum. When Century Aluminum shut down, Century was 10% of the West Virginia load of Appalachian Power. So anytime when you're designing rates, the denominator of the sales, if it declines, rates are going to go up. In the last 12 years, I've seen basically about a 1.5% decline in residential customers. And so the company's load today in southern West Virginia is about 20% below where it was 12 years ago. And so that has probably been, as sorry as it is to say, that's been one big impact on terms of APCO's rates. If APCO had not lost those customers, and if APCO's customer count had been increasing at the same rate that the northern half of the state is, our rates would be, or rates for southern West Virginia would be basically where Mon Powers are.
Well,
and so that's our problem.
Well, that's, I guess, is where I'm confused, because you said we lost the aluminum plant, which used 10% of the power that was being generated for the southern part of West Virginia. Well, if these data centers come in and they use a whole lot more energy than the aluminum factory, why does that not affect the cost of the customers? Why does it not decrease? Because essentially you're saying the same thing. We've got a business in here that is going to utilize a lot of energy. So in my mind, that would just seem, okay, now we're going to drop those prices because now we have a replacement for that aluminum factory or whatever factory we may have in the southern part. So,
Okay, let me try to touch on that briefly. Appalachian Power, unlike, not a criticism, First Energy is deficit. As she says, they're looking at a 200 megawatt deficit in capacity capability. At this time, APCO is capacity surplus. Appalachian has about 400 to 500 megawatts of capacity in excess of its in excess of its load. So a data center in APCO's territory, I believe, has the ability to improve the situation for ratepayers. Because, but the problem is these data centers at the size they are is more than the surplus APCO has, which means they're going to have to get additional capacity. So I see some measure of opportunity in terms of the additional revenues, helping ratepayers. But once you've reached the point where you've utilized all your capacity, now you have to buy new capacity at a much higher price. And so you're going to have to try to fund that from the data centers in order to just avoid impacting the ratepayers. So I guess in the long and the short of it, I see some opportunity for ratepayer benefits to the customers of AEP, and possibly not much opportunity for those of First Energy because they have used all their capacity. So I think there's an opportunity out there, but they'll be using the transmission, which means they're going to pay transmission costs, and they're going to use this excess generation, which will provide a source for it. Today, that excess generation is sold into the PJM market, and it's you don't know what you're going to get for it. In fact, we don't get a whole lot for it in the PJM market, except on very, very tight capacity days. But if you do have a load that runs year round, like the old aluminum plant, you have a market that will use that capacity and use that energy and provide a margin for the benefit of other ratepayers.
right.
So it's a double-edged sword, depending on which side of the state you're in.
And on fixed cost, so not only is it energy generation and transmission, but fixed cost across the whole system. So they will share in that cost as well, that our current ratepayers, whether you're commercial, industrial, residential, are sharing in that cost. So that's, tree trimming, vegetation management, you name it, they'll be sharing in that cost as well at what their capacity would be, essentially. So it is helpful, it is beneficial. You're not seeing that yet because they're either just getting contracted, they're not online, they're not pulling from the system. It's coming.
Right. And I guess that's what my point was, that if we do get them, there could be a lot of benefit for the state and the customers of APCO. Okay. So I just want to clarify that. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll go to Senator Garcia, and then I believe that Delegate Funkhauser then had his hand up, and we'll try to get to you, Delegate Marple, if we can. Got about 10 plus minutes to go.
Thank you, sir. Two questions. One, and I'm getting a little bit in the weeds and I don't want to confuse myself, but when you talk about transmission lines and the cost, and I know it was talked, Terry, about, 50% right now is on the causer, the person, the entity that's trying to cause those lines to be built, and then the rest of it's shared amongst PJM members. How is that actually reflected on a resident's power bill? So is that something that is incorporated with some type of fee that they would see? Is it something that later on you all would calculate that, and if you purchase energy or you're providing that, that would be part of the rate of return that you'd be asking for the Public Service Commission? I'm just kind of interested in how does that actually work in practicality?
Well, there it is. The PJM assesses those costs to the utilities. And so it becomes a cost of service for the utilities, whatever it is, say $10 million they charge you. The commission then that will be generally included as a component of the base rates of the utility. So in a future rate case, Unless there is some sort of a pass-through mechanism by the utility that the commission has authorized. For the most part, as those costs go up, the utility will ultimately have to file for, they will, in some future rate case. Now, the offset is there'll be a cost, but there'll also be a revenue. And as long as you have, if the data center is the cost causer, the data center should be paying the cost of that. So hopefully there'll be minimal cost to other ratepayers. But so it's not an automatic thing. So it's just a part of their cost of service, which will be addressed in some future base rate case at the Public Service Commission.
Okay. Second thing, thank you. That I appreciate that. When it comes to PJM, heard about this July meeting of FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and then so PJM. My understanding, it's Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, but it's 13 states. And I've heard that there is discussion about, are there alternative ways or maybe smaller areas that you could have power generation, or that it wouldn't be such a large area. And we've heard some discussion today about the interconnectivity of states, and I think different opinions on how we work together or what's in the best interest of West Virginia. What are the arguments to keep a system where PJM has this control and is setting the price for energy rates versus maybe, again, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, maybe it's like 3 states or 4 states, or, so do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, we do. We believe there need to be some changes at PJM. Obviously, that the way it was set up, it just wasn't anticipated all the growth that we're seeing and the now demand for new generation to come on board quickly. However, the kind of the problem with that is over the last 20 years or so that almost 20 years we've been in part of PJM, we are now physically interconnected throughout PJM. All these transmission projects we've done since we've been members of PJM, they're now physically interconnected. So how do you unscramble that egg? We're not sure, but we agree there needs to be some more changes to PJM. We think the states need to have a real voice in PJM. They'd have some now, but that PJM needs to recognize more of the policies of the states it's in as well. We think there definitely need to be some big changes there, and because it just wasn't designed to handle what it's seeing today.
I'll add to that West Virginia, so we're in 5 states, and out of those 5, only 1 is vertically integrated, which is West Virginia. And we see such a benefit here compared to Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, New Jersey, just because we're able to control that generation piece for our customers where they can't in those other states. The one thing, we're definitely providing input to the state on changes we would like to see at PJM, and that will also follow at FERC. FERC right now has given PJM certain orders that they need to be putting in place. I think that's where the July meeting comes into play. You're going to have so many states putting in their input. West Virginia will be included in that. So it's really, do they redo the makeup of PJM? What does that look like? But one thing I'll tell you, and it's talking about timeline 50 by 50, is whenever in these regional transmission projects, every year they put them out for bid, right? Well, that takes a year for you to bid into it. Then it takes another year for you to get approval on what you're bidding for. Then it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get the approvals and build it out. So you're looking at 7 years before you have a solution to congestion or whatever it may be to serve end users, to make sure that the power and lights don't go out, reliability. That's how that process goes right now. And then on top of that, PJM will not accept, and they don't even accept it sometimes when you have it contracted. So I have to wait to have a load contracted before they even considered it. And it has to be so far along in the contract and everything else for them to even consider a regional solution for it, when there's nothing I can do here in the state unless there's a regional solution for it. So there's a lot that goes into it. We're weighing in. I know the state's weighing in, but I think you'll see something happen. The question is what?
Thank you.
Delegate Funkhauser, before you do that real quickly, I'm going to elbow my way in for just a moment. I think, Ms. Reel, you said that you all are communicating to the state changes you think that should occur within PJM. Who are you communicating those changes to?
So the PSC is who has the seat at the table from the state side. So we talking with the PSC on what we'd like to see.
Yeah, we had some legislation last session that didn't pass. That was part of that legislation was designed to give us hopefully a bigger seat at the table within PGM or a little more influence. It didn't make it through, but do you communicate those proposed changes to the legislature ever? Do you ever tell the delegates or senators?
Yes, we do. And
Energy Committee?
Speaker, Senate President. So
All right.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I think that'd be help. I mean, to the,
me to come talk about it.
I think I think the members here would love to know what those proposed changes are. This PGM issue is a huge issue for all of us. It just kind of weighs down the whole state. So we'd love to know what your all's advice is on what that can be done there. So Delegate Funkhauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for Mr. Eads as well. It's a lot of my constituents, a lot of folks are confused on the whole PGM process, and it seems like we get maybe the short end of the stick as a ratepayer on paying for the transmission lines that primarily benefit Virginia, as my colleague Delegate Ridenour was speaking to earlier. So what can we as policymakers do through the regulation of the Public Service Commission to give ourselves more sovereignty between the PJM? Assume, you're talking that the PJM is considering doing something maybe in the future. Well, assume they don't do anything. Everything stays status quo. What can we do to help you protect our ratepayers, but also, to fairly allocate these costs if and when these transmission lines come through? House Bill, as an example, House Bill 4012 did not pass, but there was an amendment there to basically say roughly commensurate the cost. If 99% of the benefit goes to Virginia, then those costs should be allocated 99% to Virginia. And if it's a 1% benefit for West Virginia, then 1% of the cost allocated to West Virginia ratepayers.
Well, I honestly don't know what the legislature could do right at the moment. I'm sure there's something you could do, but I don't have a suggestion at this point. But I would just get back to what I had said earlier. The current method of allocating cost across the entire PJM footprint, and we're talking from Michigan, Indiana, all the way east of us, Maryland and Pennsylvania, is based upon a rate design and cost allocation process that FERC has approved for PJM. So to change that requires PJM putting something before the FERC and having the FERC approve something different than what we do today. I think in general, when we talked about the 50-50 proposition, the way they allocate, I'm not going to suggest that has been a bad process. I mean, basically, you build a transmission line in Indiana to serve somebody. We pay probably maybe 10% of that cost. We build a transmission line in West Virginia, and Indiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, they all pay a share of it. So basically, we don't pay 100% of what winds up here. However, but that worked well when you're basically you're building a line in Michigan, then you're fixing one in West Virginia, one in Virginia. When it's spread out over time, and it's being done as needed to serve just normal load growth, that has been a reasonable process and a one that generally probably has been fair. As I said, these data centers and the magnitude of the load are game changers. The process was not set up for these kinds of loads. And this is what I think all of the states, not just West Virginia, are struggling with right at the moment. Unfortunately for us, Virginia seems to be the epicenter of the data center load, and particularly up in that northern Virginia corridor. And that has started to put a lot of sunshine on things that are looking to go into our area. And so I think, I think everybody I hear from is saying PJM needs to revisit this process, go back to FERC and say, here's another way to do this that's better and that's more fair to the incumbent people, and basically that protects residential, commercial, industrial customers, the day-to-day people of the state, and let the data centers fend for themselves, so to speak. But there's going to be some time taken to get that done, and it takes action at the FERC. not necessarily at the state commission. The state can put forward its suggestions and comment on it and participate in whatever PJM forums there are, but ultimately that will be decided by the FERC.
We got two more delegates who have questions. I apologize. We're going to move on to them to try and get this wrapped up. So Delegate Marple, and then Delegate Maynor, if we have time, we'll get to him last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question, I don't, who's going to answer it, but my constituents are asking, they know about the opposition over in the Eastern Panhandle and where these lines are going to go through. They want to know, are these people going to be compensated if the line crosses their property or if a tower is built on their property? And is it going to be a one-time fee, or is it going to be a rental like the towers that they built for cell phones, where they're rented and leased out over a period of time?
Yeah, everyone who agrees to have the line come across their property is compensated at least market value. And typically it's one-time payment, but it depends on the arrangement. But usually it's a upfront one-time lease agreement for a number of years.
Okay. Do you have any idea what those charges or what would be paid out for those fees?
Those vary and are negotiated, and depends what their property's worth. I mean, it's goes on their property valuation and negotiation between the transmission company and property owner.
I know with the Mountain Valley Pipeline came through part of my district, property owners were begging for them to come through them. They made a tremendous profit off of it.
Right-of-way issues are the same with us. I mean, we pay those costs, those folks to go across and negotiate those prices with them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Maynor. I was going to ask the staff, do we ever establish a quorum just for purposes of the minutes? Do we get enough members here? If you know. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, going back to what you said originally, Sammy, about the certification timeline from the PSC and maybe a recommendation for us, put you on the spot. Do you know of any other state like ours that puts mandates on those timelines and the positive or negative ramifications of that? And then I was going to go to Mr. Eads and kind of get his opinion on what effects that would have, or, you know, what the ramifications of that would be.
It varies, from some states do, some states don't, and the timelines vary as well. That might be, quite a bit shorter. I mean, anything less than the 400 will help. But again, I have to give credit to the commission when it comes to transmission projects. They can do it sooner and have, but generation projects are a concern with the 400-day timeline. We'd sort of like to have it shorter for transmission too. Sure, that'd be great. But
I should know this. Do we have any timeline in code currently?
400 days.
So 400 is in code, and that is the, okay.
Yes, for any project that's 50 million or over, whether it's new or a rebuild on a transmission line, or a new large project at a coal plant, that's a rebuild of some equipment. Currently 50 million and over requires that 400-day timeline kicks in.
And you kind of recommended potentially 180 days as kind of a good time frame.
That was just throwing that out there, but anything less would help than 400 days.
One other thing that I haven't mentioned, and that we've come into recently over the last couple of years is local. So we'll get approval from the PSC to do a substation or whatever it may be. And then we'll end up having local county come in and say we have to go before their planning and have approval from them. I have no idea who's coming out to inspect a substation in that county from the county, but that's something that we've come across as some local issues that then add months to our timeline. We had one where we were trying to serve a residential community and school, and we had to drop a new substation for that, and it added 4 months to our timeline.
I think I have to go back and look at the code, but there is the 400 days, but the 400 days is basically an end point. It has to be done in that amount of time. Nothing prevents it from being much sooner. The utilities today file certificate cases. In fact, we have a few going on right now at the commission But these are for lines of 69,000 volts or 138,000 volts. A lot of it are simply rebuilds of an existing line or reinforcement of an existing line. And some of those cases can go through in a matter of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It all depends upon, in many respects, upon public opposition, intervention, and the level of detail that you have to go through. Many of these certificates, like I said, can be done without any difficulty. Potomac Edison has a line right today that is before the commission. It's a rebuild of an existing line, and they're simply going to rebuild within the existing right-of-way, just build taller structures and new conductor. But that case will move fairly fast. There really is no opposition to it because you're not expanding the right-of-way or changing the right-of-way. But clearly, the bigger the line, the more concerned people you have and the more study that needs to be done. And so that will drag it out. But again, 400 days may be the maximum. It can be done earlier. And it has been done.
And we were talking about maybe even separating generation from transmission, possibly maybe even having a separate timeline for generation as well. Because the commission usually does really good on the timelines on transmission. It's been a while since any of us has really filed anything, really big for generation as well too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Yes, sir. I think that's it for the Q&A today. We appreciate the panelists being here. Appreciate the members for sticking it out. I don't think we've established a quorum. Is that right? So we can't move to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. I do want to say for the staff, Delegate Funkhauser told me that he and Senator Rucker are not listed as being present at the prior meeting. So let's make sure we get that corrected before we ask to have those approved at the next interim session. With that said, any interim or miscellaneous business for the interim committee from my co-chair? I did want to say one thing. Yeah. Just one real quick piece of miscellaneous business. We're actually going to have in Davis tonight at the fire hall, there's going to be a data center panel discussion. Delegate Hanson's going to be on that panel. Chris Morris from Commerce is going to be in that panel. And Amy Margolis from Tucker United is going to be in the panel as well. And it'll be moderated by Dan Parks, who's a local journalist up here. It'll be a discussion, kind of a broad discussion on data centers in general. Of course, there's one here in Tucker County that's at least been proposed. It's a subject for a lot of discussion. I'm sure among other things, we're going to talk about House Bill 2014, which I think Delegate Hanson voted against and I voted for. You're probably much more excited to talk about why you voted against it up here in Tucker County. So I'm clearly the braver of the two of us on this particular meeting. But anyway, he'll be there as well to talk about his thoughts along with some other folks. I think most of us or most of you may be at dinner this evening, but we'll be live streamed. For anyone listening, if you want to watch in to that, we would certainly invite you to do so. Having conversations and honest discussions about these issues, whichever way you think you may be on, it's really important, obviously. So I invite anyone who's listening, if you want to live stream in on that this evening, you're more than welcome to. With that, I'll give the microphone to my co-chair for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion's adopted. We're adjourned.